Hey, welcome to the Raw Podcast. We are real ass women talking about real ass shit, and I want to welcome you to the first day of what I think is a very transformative journey. I'm so grateful that you guys have chosen to join me today and chosen to show up for yourself because this moment is all about you. Over the next 30 days, we're going to dive deep into what it truly means to reclaim your identity and reclaim your voice. Now, I know the world can be loud. It's constantly sending us messages about who we should be, how we should act, what success looks like, and who we're supposed to become. But here's the truth. You don't have to follow those rules anymore. This is your time to rediscover who you are beneath all of those expectations, roles, and labels you've been carrying for far too long. This journey is not about changing who you are. It's about remembering who you've always been. It's about reclaiming your essence and stepping into your full power unapologetically. Over the next few days, we're going to explore the layers, the beliefs, and the stories that have shaped you, and we'll try to do the work to shed them one day at a time. So whether you've been feeling lost, disconnected, or like you've been playing a role that isn't you, I am here to tell you, baby, you are not alone. This is a safe space where you can be real, be vulnerable, and most importantly, be authentic. So if you're ready, let's dive into today's episode and take the first step towards reclaiming the truth of who you really are. And guys, if you like what we're doing here on the Raw Podcast, I ask that you like, follow, and subscribe on Instagram and YouTube so we can reach as many people as we possibly can. It's greatly appreciated. Love, Mar. Welcome to the Raw Podcast. We are real ass women talking about real ass shit. My name is Marsha Daly, and I'm your host, joined with my cousin and co-host, Melanie Mathlier.
Hello.
How was your week?
Very hectic. Very hectic.
Inauguration's tomorrow.
I know.
Inauguration. Are you going to watch the inauguration?
No.
You are.
Are you?
You're Michelle Obamaing it.
Yes. I am with my first lady. Yes.
I have plans.
Okay.
That do not involve me watching the inauguration.
Well, do you think that there's a problem with the fact that Lady Michelle is not going?
I think she's sticking to her convictions, and I think that that's okay. I don't think that, I'm not the person that's like, oh, if you voted for Trump, you can't be my friend.
Correct.
I'm not that person. If that's who you voted for, you have your reasons for why you voted for that person and whatever. That's cool. We're still friends. So I think that she's choosing to stick in her convictions, that this is not somebody that she feels holds.
Well, I think it goes along with the theme that we're talking about today about honoring yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there are some situations that are things that you don't want to be a part of.
Right.
And
she's sticking to it.
Right.
Yeah, she's like, I'm not going. I will tell you this, though. I like Ivanka. I feel like I like Ivanka.
I don't know if I know enough about her.
I think Ivanka, listen, I think she's really not with the shits. I think that she's really like, yo, this is my dad.
She did kind of dip out when things started going south.
Yeah.
She kind of dipped out. She's like, okay.
I feel like me and Ivanka, we could be cool.
She does seem like she's a smart.
Yes.
And together.
Yes.
Because when things started going south, she just dipped.
Yeah. I like Ivanka a lot. If somebody told me that Ivanka was at Mar-a-Lago, I'd probably go.
Okay.
Just to see Ivanka. Like, it has nothing to do with him. I just want to go see Ivanka.
Yeah, she seems like a pretty smart person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like her a lot. For those of you that are tuning in, welcome to our first episode of 2020. We are calling this episode Reclaiming Our Voices. Today, we are going to explore the power of self-discovery, growth, and reclaiming our identities. I think it is a deep conversation, and we've had numerous conversations about this in the past, especially what I've gone through in the last year. It was so important for me to have those discussions with you because I feel like this is a part of life that I completely checked out of and I did not do. We want to talk about how do we define ourselves as women, or how do we do that if we have not done so already. And I think a lot of it, at least for me, a lot comes from not knowing what that is and no one posing that question to me at a very early age. And I think that this is something that a lot of women do wrestle with, especially in a world where we're told what we should be. Like we're told what we should look like and how we should act and where we should go and what decorum to have and, you know, what women should be and what that looks like to society. And if you don't define that for yourself,
that's where I'm going.
Right. So if you don't define that for yourself,
agree.
Then it's very easy for you to become what anyone or anything wants you to be.
Because no matter what, you are going to be defined.
Right.
So the question is, are you defining yourself?
Or is something or is someone defining you? Is
it anything that you come in contact with that is stronger than your sense of self that is defining you?
Because I remember having a teacher in elementary school. I don't remember if it was elementary school or middle school, but I had a teacher. It was elementary school. And I remember her like telling us as little girls how much we needed to be a chameleon. Yep.
I don't like that though.
Yep. I remember her telling us how, like, you know, you should be able to be this way when you're around this set of people or this way around this set of people or that way. And I think that what it did was it put in our heads that we needed to conform to whatever the room was. Correct. Instead of operating in our authenticity.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to ask
dangerous.
And I can't fault her.
Okay.
I cannot fault her because in truth, and we really don't have to get into it from a race standpoint, but it is what it is. I think because that is the world that she grew up in order for her to try to be as helpful to you as possible, she was trying to give you the advice that worked for her, and I totally get it.
Right.
And but this is the thing. If I step into a room and I have to, it goes about thermometer versus thermostat.
Right. Right. One controls the temperature in the room and the other one sets the temperature of the room.
Right.
Yeah.
So if what she was in essence saying to you, which I totally understand where she was coming from, because more than likely from her generation standpoint, that's what she had to do to survive. So she was really she was trying to give you what she thought was good advice. But at those points in time, we were more thermometers. And I think where I want to see our next generation go to is thermostat.
Right. I think a lot of it starts with societal pressures though. And I get it. Cultural pressures too, right? Generational things that are going on in your family.
Yep.
But for this generation, I think a lot of it with social media, the pressures of what society puts on, especially women, to be like, if you get on Instagram, think about it. There's filters to make you look a certain kind of way.
Yes.
There's all of these different influencers. No hate to the influencers at all, but there's all these different influencers that are, you know, showing you the quickest way to change your eyes or to look like this or to dress like this or how to make your waist smaller and your butt bigger. Like all of these societal pressures. And I think that it's very hard. Now, listen, I did not define myself, and we'll talk about where that got me at. But I think it's very hard for this younger generation to operate in their authenticity or even know what that is, because they're just surrounded by so much stuff. And there's all of these pressures.
I think even if I think about when I was a little girl and when you were a little girl, because we were raised by the same people. So I think when our village was in control, we were only exposed to X amount of things. Our world was very small. It was it was church, it was family events, and it was school. So your world was very small.
Right.
And we had a lot of people around us that told us, you know, you are amazing. You can do anything that you put your mind to. You are smart. You are this, you are that. And then we went to school. And then sometimes when we are at school, then and especially as you get older, then you have all of those influences coming. We never really grew up with social media being what it is.
Right.
So a lot of our issues probably came in when we were like, let's say 16s and 17s, and we really cared more about what it is that people were saying. Now we have kids that have phones when they're 9 and 10 and 11, and those influences are coming into them faster.
Yeah.
And we don't realize the damage that is happening, because instead of the village defining you and then putting you out into the world is coming in faster
Yeah.
and when you're younger.
Yeah. And I think the message that's being told is that you're not as good as you are. Like, you know what I mean? And I think I know I felt it. I think that, and listen, yeah, we were raised by the same people, but I think that when you come from a background where, someone's like, you can't go out the house dressed like that. Like, not like because you're dressed provocatively, but like, go put some makeup on your face before you leave out the house. Or if you went and played outside with your friends too much and it was like, look how you burnt up in the sun and you're so dark. Like,
okay.
you end up feeling like you're just you in your authenticity and as you are
Yeah.
are not enough. And when that is instilled in you at a young age, it is damaging.
It is.
And dangerous as you get older.
Well, I think it happened, like, let's say because I'm older than you. I'm like 10 years older than you. So I think for my generation, it was more, well, okay, we need to look a certain way, we need to speak a certain way, we need to walk a certain way. So I think it might be different for each generation, but the message is the same.
Yeah.
That you can't walk into a room just being yourself and be accepted as smart, as beautiful, and I think we need to find a way that instead of our children being defined by what is happening outside, because you and I know, if you don't have your mind right when you go to school, and even as you get older and you go to work, you can really be tossed to and fro if you don't know within yourself who you are. And if you think that peer pressure ends when you're 16 and 17, oh no, because it's happening even as you get older. So if you don't define who you are for yourself, anything that's around you is going to define it for you. And then also, if you don't have what, let's say, other people have around you, depending on the car that you drive, depending on how much money you make, depending on, all of these different things that are external things. If you are looking for those things to make you have meaning and make you feel that, your self-worth, those things can change.
Right.
And then when they change, that's when we get lost.
Right. There's a book that I read called The Second Sex. In the book, she says, or she argues, that womanhood is a social construct and that we aren't born into a fully formed idea of who we should be as a woman. Instead, we're shaped by the world around us. And that shaping is what limits us and pushes us into roles that we may not align with who we truly are. And I think that that's so true, because a lot of times what happens is, again, you're taught how to walk, how to talk, how to behave in certain rooms or certain elements. And when you don't know who you are and you are that chameleon, now society, the outside world, has molded you into what it wants you to be. And that's why I think sometimes that's why there are so many women who are unhappy and we'll get into what that means in relationships too, but in life in general, that outside of their relationship, outside of work, just blatantly unhappy. And I think that's mostly because, and we've had this conversation as well, when you're like, you're not walking in your purpose and you're not living in your authenticity. So you are a stranger to yourself. And when you're a stranger to yourself, it's a very lonely place to be.
But I think sometimes when we don't allow children to develop based on what it is that they were put on this earth for. So you could be a child, like let's say we were very intentional when it came to our children, that we wanted them to develop based on whatever it is that they liked. We were trying to see, all right, where are you leaning? And okay, you want to do soccer, you want to do music, you want to do this, you want to do that. And we were trying not to come into the decision. Now, if you said that you wanted to do this, you needed to commit for X amount of time.
Right.
But we weren't the ones that were choosing it for you. But this is the problem. If you go from parents that are telling you everything, which you need guidance.
Right.
So I'm not trying to say that you don't need guidance. Every child needs guidance, period. But I think we need to create an environment where not only do we give them the basics, but we need to allow them to unfold based on their journey.
Okay.
So because if you're going based on this is what my parents think I should do, like I've known people that they have defined that this 3-year-old is going to be a doctor. They could be the most horrible doctor ever.
Right.
Because we've all had doctors that, yes, they know the technical skills related to this, they have the technical knowledge, but they have horrible bedside manner. And that means that that's not your call.
From island parents, coming from island parents, there was
Couple of choices.
you had choices. You were going to be a doctor or a nurse, a lawyer, or an accountant.
Yes.
That was it. And if you got lucky, you might have had a nice enough parent that said you could be a teacher.
Yes.
But that was it. Those were your four
We
options.
did not sacrifice
right. Like this is what, and this is what you are going to do. So you
we
are
came
a doctor.
to this country so that.
Exactly.
Yes,
so,
yes.
and I think that they didn't nurture anything outside of that.
And I think if you look at the immigrant experience, a lot of us left our countries of origin, not because we didn't love our countries of origin, but because of the opportunity. So then when we came where there was more opportunity, in their minds, okay, we need them to take advantage of the opportunity, but you never asked or saw what it is that that child wanted to develop. I've known people that they have followed a certain path, gone into corporate America, made their money, and they came back and they were teachers.
Right.
Because that's where their heart was.
Part was right.
So I'm not knocking anybody's ability to make their money, but I don't think that you become truly happy unless you are walking in your purpose.
Exactly.
Period.
1,000%. I think a lot of times though we're taught to be like so passive and overly accommodating, both mentally, physically, and emotionally, that we're just kind of like, even as a young person, like, okay, this is what my parents want us to do. And you're taught at that moment to be overly accommodating because you're like, I'm going to accommodate my parents' wishes, hopes, and dreams for me over what it is that I really want for myself. And then again, you're not in your purpose, you're not walking in your purpose, and you're unhappy.
Yeah. And I know that we were definitely not perfect.
Right.
We were not perfect because
you said it. I was perfect. I was perfect.
But I think even as a child, because we are a family that really honors education. So if you said that I wanted to become an artist, Melanie right now would have been, okay, let's do this. But me, let's say 15 years ago, I would have been worried about, oh my gosh, are they going to be able to make a living? Instead of me trying to be more supportive, which I probably should have been, because we could have made sure that we put guardrails around it, that you can make your living, but you still would be able to pursue your passion. I think my generation, in our minds, it was, okay, get the good job, work X amount of time, get your pension, and then you're fine. Whereas I think nowadays, and what we see, and I really embrace what the young people are doing, where they're trying to define their purpose. But I think we're almost going to the other end of the spectrum, where we have people that they're not thinking about true purpose. They're more thinking about, well, how can I do the least amount of work and get the most amount of money?
Yep.
So to me, that's still not you walking in your purpose, because it's, you need to figure out what it is that I like to do. Where is it that I am lost in this, and it is, 10 hours later and I'm still doing this, and I didn't even know that much time passed.
Right.
But I think because we're still in a place where we are defining success based on external means, I still don't think we are looking inside in order to determine purpose. I think we are defining success based on whether it's how many followers you have.
Right. Which is that whole social media
Right.
aspect.
So if you put a video out and you don't get 500,000 views, then you think that you are not a success, which that's not true.
Right.
What if there were 10 people that saw it, that because you are so authentic, you touched them and they are learning about, whatever it is that you are trying to impart. You changed somebody's life, and it could have been one of those 10 people that you changed, and you could have 5,000 views, because a lot of times people are doing things just for the shock value.
Right.
And you have all of those views, but you're not walking in your purpose, and you feel like you're sometimes a sellout,
Right.
because you don't even believe what it is that you're putting out there.
How do we walk in our truth despite the expectations that are put on us?
I think you have to be able to listen to yourself. I think you have to make a decision of, am I doing this for the likes? Am I doing this? It goes back to that whole people pleaser thing.
Right. So one of the things she said in the book was, you've got to get to a point where you're very, very comfortable saying yes to yourself, to yourself, and no to everyone else.
Correct.
Or no to things that don't serve you.
Now, I'm not a proponent of anybody being unkind. Let's say if you're a mom and you have kids, no, you can't ignore your children.
Right.
But I think you have to sometimes put yourself first. I think we have to carve out spaces for ourselves.
Well, because I think we lose ourselves, and I can't speak for having children. I can only speak for conversations that I've had with people who have children. And I think the common thing that I've heard is that a lot of times women lose themselves in their children, in their families, in their careers. And they're so consumed by that they've lost their voice, and they don't know how to reclaim that, because the kids need and husband needs and work needs, and they don't take any of that time for themselves. And then they look back 10 years later, 20 years later, 30 years later, especially when, like a lady I was talking to the other day, she was saying she didn't realize that she had lost herself until all of her kids were out of her house. Then once her kids were gone, now she's in the house with her husband, and she had to keep in mind, you have to remember that her husband worked a very demanding job, and he was gone a lot, or he came home from work at 5 o'clock. She had her own job. So they spent a limited amount of time together, which was also with whatever the kids had going on. And now the kids are gone. And now it's just the two of them. Now it's just the two of them in the house. And they are strangers to one another. And they had to get to know each other again. But she said more than being a stranger to her husband, she realized she was a stranger to herself.
Yeah, I can see how that could happen.
Yeah.
Because I think if you think about the fact that most people, they have kids when they're 20 something, 30 something. So it's almost as if we are taught as women that once you have children, the children come first. So it's almost as if you put yourself last in order to, you make time for other people, but you don't make time for yourself. And this is the thing. It goes back to what you hear people say all the time. You have to give yourself the oxygen first. So if we as women don't teach our children, because it's beyond the boy-girl situation.
Right.
So the same-sex parent is a child's biggest role model. So let's say if I have a boy and a girl, so the way that I take care of myself, I am teaching my daughter how to take care of herself in the future. And then if I have a son, let's say if he is then going to have a wife, for argument's sake, then I am in essence teaching him how to show up in his family life also. So us making time for ourselves and showing our young people that time by yourself. Now, if you have, let's say, 5 kids, no, you might not.
You
be
might
able,
not, but that was a choice you made. I'm sorry. You chose to have 5 kids. You might not. You might get 5 minutes to yourself, sis.
You might.
That's all you might get.
It might be a walk around the block.
kids.
You might be able to put on your, your headphones or your headset, and you get a chance to walk around the block. And maybe it's that you take an hour walk, but you have to take care of yourself some kind of way. So my sister, Michelle got married when they were like 21. So as they were developing, not only as people, but also with the kids, they needed to find time for themselves. And they decided to have date night in the house after the child
went to sleep.
Okay. So the child woke up and came and saw them having this really fancy dinner. Like, is this what you do when I go to sleep?
You have to find the time for yourself. And as a couple, you have to find the time for yourself as a couple.
Yeah.
But I think for women, though, we sometimes, a lot of times, prioritize putting everyone and everything first. And I've seen women with no children and no husband put church first, put their job first, put everything first before themselves, right?
I was tired. I was very tired.
It's the most exhausting thing. Yeah. Once you stop doing it and once you choose to put yourself first, Melanie, it is one of the being a people pleaser is exhausting.
Because what it is that you're always you're tossed to and fro.
And you don't say no to anything. So what you end up doing is saying yes to everything and then spreading yourself so thin that you're exhausted.
And then you have to also remember that when you are exhausted, what is manifesting inside of your body is stress, inflammation, endocrine disruption, hormonal disruption, heart disease,
everything.
Yeah. Ovaries doing all kind of crazy stuff. So I think that as we need to take better care of ourselves, but we also need to give ourselves permission to have those quiet moments,
right?
To be able to say no,
right?
Sometimes, if you're the person that, let's say, takes care of your house, sometimes it's just gonna have to be dirty.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm sorry. Where I am in my life is, and I say this to my sisters all the time, where I wake up in the morning, 8:30, there's some things being crossed off of that list.
Right.
When I get off of work, I'm gonna sit on my comfy couch.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna get a glass of wine.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing anything.
Listen, there is a part of self-definition that I think that it's so important to teach girls when they're younger, that it is okay to sit and be by yourself.
Yes.
It is okay to love yourself so much that you just want to be alone.
But I think one of the big things that I think we need to do is create those safe spaces.
Absolutely.
Because they're young people. So there's just a lot going on. And I would prefer for them to come to me as opposed to go to their friends, because that's just the blind leading the blind.
Well, that's a part of teaching them to define themselves, right? To be confident in yourself enough. And I'm okay with you being confident in yourself enough that you can come and have these real conversations with me.
But we can't react.
No, we can't listen. We can't, we cannot
we listen,
be reactive.
but we don't judge.
Right. We listen because we can't. We can't. And I think that that's so important.
Let me tell you something.
You want to have a safe space
that have been shared with me that within my body, I'm like,
oh yeah, 1,000%. And there are things where I'm sure, okay, so as you know, my godmother is deceased. So I've given myself a self-appointed godmother. And my self-appointed godmother, Miss Ann,
yes.
I know sometimes I call her and say some stuff to her, and I know in her head she's like, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God. Praise God, praise God.
I got one better for you. I thought I got her past this.
Right.
I thought we were past this.
I know she has those moments, but she is my safe space,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I
yeah.
know that I can come to her often.
She is an angel.
Listen,
She is an angel.
I
Yes.
know that I can come to her in my truest authenticity and with no judgment at all, right?
Because she just wants you to be happy.
And she just wants me to be good.
Yeah,
And she just wants me to be good. So I think it's very important that we create those spaces for girls
and I think
growing up.
something very important that you just said. There are times when you need more than one safe space.
1,000%.
So, I think sometimes we think that as a mom, that it has to be within my house that my child feels safe. But this is the thing. You have different situations that are going to unfold. So as long as it is somebody that, is caring and loving your child, that's all right.
Agreed.
I think that's awesome. When you have a great support system, mom and dad are on the same page, everything, they have a firm plan for how the children are supposed to, everybody's on the same page. Awesome, great. But I think for whatever reason, you always have role models outside of your home. Now, I think that's a great thing.
There's a lot of parents that don't think that's okay.
I know. If you want every single thing that your child is exposed to come from, your confines, I think you're limiting their ability to have access to multiple ways of resolving matters, multiple ways of seeing things.
Yeah.
I want as many people that have different opinions in my life as possible, because that's the only way I see 360.
Right.
So if you and I think the same way about everything, there are going to be obstacles that our young people come up against that they're going to have absolutely no way to navigate through.
Right.
You do need different influences in their lives. And that's where sometimes you have mentorship, where you have the children that are exposed to different things. And they, okay, when we feel frustrated, how do we use our words?
Right.
If you grew up in a household that, let's say, your parents did not know how to manage their emotions or articulate how they're feeling, when you enter this world and you go into the workplace and you get upset and you don't even know how to use your words, then you're going to be fired.
Right.
And you are going to be you're never going to be able to have that steady growth if you are not exposed to as many people that love you as possible.
Right. And I think growing up for me, it was always said kind of, and even if it wasn't said, it was understood. Like, you don't go and talk your business over here and over there. As I've gotten older, I've realized the importance of healing out loud and not to have the opinions of the peanut gallery, but to have safe spaces to be able to say, this is how I'm showing up today in this form, right? Whether it's what you're accustomed of seeing me as or not, this is how I'm showing up, and being able for the people that are in my safe space to be like, okay, well, Marsha, that's something's up. What's up? What's the matter? And me being able to tell them what's going on with no judgment, and then be able.
The key. The key is, and we have to get better at, number one, being a safe space. Number two, not telling people's business.
I think as you get older, you realize that, no, I just, my circle, I got to keep my circle small. I'm keeping my circle small. And these are the people that serve me in my life. Like, these are the people who breathe life into me, who motivate me, who inspire me.
And everybody is not going to be able to travel with you.
And everybody can't be with you.
We give our self to people too freely.
Absolutely.
Even in relationships.
Yeah.
Somebody has to earn that trust. Somebody has to earn that intimacy. And I think we mistake words for actions.
Right.
And I think for me, one of the big things that I had to do is I had to be in a space where I more watched your actions than your words.
But you learned or taught yourself, like, this is what I'm going to accept and what I'm not going to accept?
It was hard.
Right. I think one of the hardest things, or one of the hardest questions, is asking yourself, who am I? What is my purpose? And when you're trying to redefine yourself, is what is not serving my purpose, and to get rid of those things that are in your that are not serving your purpose, to get rid of them and take them out of your life. And it is a hard reality, because a lot of times, Melanie, that's when you come to terms with the fact that there's people in your life that you may genuinely love, but they don't love you in your truest form. And in order for you to be who you are supposed to be and who God has intended for you to be, you got to let them go.
All right. The question is, does it serve me or does it not serve me?
Right.
So if you are somebody that every time I am around you, you're sucking the life out of me.
Yeah.
When we leave each other's presence, I feel really bad about myself. Or if I'm doubting a lot of the things that I was, confident about when we first got together. It's, you have to get to the point where you're thinking to yourself, is this somebody that I want to continue to interact with? You have to listen to yourself, but you can't listen to yourself unless you are able to spend quiet time with yourself,
Right.
Which a lot of us, and I think we noticed this during the pandemic, we have trouble with quiet.
Right. No, for the last 20 years, I've been running, it was a constant rat race of work, and work. And I think when the pandemic hit, there was still a lot of work, but there was still a lot of downtime. And in that downtime was when I started to define myself.
Because you had time.
Because I had time, right? Yes. So in that downtime, that's when all the chips started to fall. So in that downtime is when I was like, wait a minute. No, I don't like this. No, I'm not okay with this. And when I really took the time to get in therapy.
Yes.
So now with therapy and me having this free time to define myself and say, what are the things that Marsha really wants? No, Marsha's not okay with this, because I was one of those people that did not define myself, did not set up those boundaries, and then got into relationship. And it does not just have to be a relationship with a partner or a significant other. It could be work. It could be work.
Work can do it to you.
It could be with your family. It could be with your friends. Do it to you. Right. And you get lost in those relationships.
Yeah.
So I got completely lost. Like, my relationship defined me. And I became everything that my relationship came with, whether it was work or what that was supposed to look like, or acting like the perfect couple and being out. Like, I was defined by that. Now, what happens is when that relationship ended and I chose to, and it ended because I chose to now put myself first and say, well, I want to do this. And I realized that once I started pushing back and saying, well, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do this, because I had been a chronic, and my therapist will tell anybody this, maybe she won't tell anybody, but she'll tell me this, that I am a chronic people pleaser. So because I was this chronic people pleaser, and the relationship that I was in was so accustomed to me always saying yes to whatever they wanted, the minute I started to say no, it was like, well, who are you? And what are you? Well, it's because I'm just now figuring out who I am and what I am and what I want. And it was detrimental to the relationship, because, again, that person needed someone to constantly always say yes to them, and they needed yes people around them. And that's what I was for them for a very long time. So the minute that I started to say no and choose myself and define Marsha as Marsha and not what the relationship was, the dynamic of the relationship changed.
Where we need to be is, we have to walk into relationship knowing that this is not a corporation.
Right.
So you do have Marsha, and then you do have who your mate is going to be. Now, prior to you meeting that mate, you were on a path.
Right.
Now, there are some people that their interests align to the point where, let's say, they can start a corporation together and they can run a business together. But to me, that's a small subset. I think you have two distinct paths, and yes, you're going to have some things that you have in common, like, all right, how do we feel about, family, and how do we feel about this, and how do we feel? So you do have those foundational interests that they have to be aligned. It can't be that you believe in monogamy and this person believes in polygamy.
Right.
It can't be that you, let's say you are an entrepreneur, but this person is only comfortable with people that have a steady 9 to 5. So there's some foundational things that have to be in place. But I think when you have one person that is living in their truth and walking their walk, and you have another person that's living in theirs, I think part of this whole we have to be a power couple. You don't necessarily have to be a power couple,
but you can be and still listen. Shirley Ralph said it best. Her and her husband are a power couple. She said, "I got my life. He has his life. I have my light. He has his light.
Yes.
I have my career. He has his career." And they're a power couple.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean, I think that we get caught up in the definition of what a power couple should look like. And that should be that we're in this one thing together and we're growing this together. No, you can be an amazing, self-accomplished realtor. And your husband might be the best civil engineer in the world. That's a power couple. You guys together are a power couple. It does not mean that
it goes back to the definition.
Right.
Because a lot of times, and I honestly had never thought about it the way that you just said it. Because a lot of times when we think power couple, we think that their interests are aligned and they do everything together.
Right.
Whereas what your definition is more in line with what I think it needs to be, where it is two people separately living in their truth, walking their path. Our differences allow us to see 360.
Right.
And I think when we think that everything has to be the same, and some of the most successful couples that I know, when you see them separately and then you see them together, you're like, how did that work? Because they are two totally separate people.
Yeah.
Like my husband is my biggest cheerleader. He wants me to be who it is that I was put on this earth to be, period.
Right.
But when you have somebody that they need to control who you are becoming because it makes them feel better.
Right.
That's not necessarily the person that wants to see your light shine.
I don't want to just put it on men, but I can only speak from my experience that there's you can sometimes find yourself in a relationship where people or your mate almost finds it offensive that you choose to take up space for yourself.
Yeah.
I get so many DMs from women who got blindsided by a divorce or they've been cheated on so many times. And listen, when you don't know who you are, it is very easy to be like, okay, he cheated this time, but he won't do it again. Or for them to be like, oh, well, it's something that you did, right?
Correct.
So for me, like anytime there was infidelity, it would be, well, you didn't wear your hair straight, or you didn't cook enough. And then what that does is, if you don't know yourself, that gives someone the opportunity to just chip away from you little by little until you are a shell of yourself.
I think one of the things that we need to do is we can't go from one relationship to another.
Right.
I think especially even as when you're a young lady.
Well, how about let's not get in a relationship until you define, like, let's figure out, you have to figure out who you are. There was a point maybe in my 20s, and I got my relationship very young. I got in my relationship at 21. But I wish that someone was like, baby girl, you don't even know yourself yet. Like,
but I think,
pump your brakes.
so this is the thing. You are going to continue to evolve.
Right.
So I don't even know if saying that, I know that I have to know myself to some point before I can be a good mate.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think part of it is finding your person
That's going to be there
that is
as you
there.
evolve.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Because, one of my sisters got married when she was like 21.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't know who she was. He didn't know who he was. But what they were willing to do was to support the other person's evolution and growth.
Right.
And this is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
If you are with somebody that is sabotaging the relationship,
Yeah.
if they are cheating on you all the time, or if you are going for this job, or you want, whatever it is that you want to do from a career standpoint, and they're not supporting you,
Mm-hmm.
that's not the best. To me, if you are trying to undermine everything that I want to do
For myself. Yeah.
whether it be that, I need 30 minutes before we go to bed to read my book. Well, what do you mean self-help?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
Don't you have enough? Don't you, that means that you're not happy if you're.
Or why are you in therapy? You're just going to a therapist to talk about me.
Right. So anybody that does not allow you to grow
Mm-hmm.
is not necessarily the person that is.
When I sat down with myself and I said, Marsha, are you okay with knowing that this is something that you failed at?
Yes.
And I was like, yeah.
And that's when I knew that I was putting myself first.
Mm-hmm.
Because, first of all, nobody gets married to get divorced.
Right.
So, and, the beautiful weddings and the beautiful homes and so on, you think about all of those things and, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to start over from scratch, and I'm going to have to this, and but if the situation that you are in is not serving you being happy within yourself, it's one or two things have to happen. It's either you and your person are going to have to decide, wait a minute, we have to figure out how we work on ourselves individually. It is not only the union that you have to think about, it's each individual person.
Right.
And I could make a decision to stay, you could make a decision to leave, and I still need to walk away with my mind intact.
Right.
So I just think that we have to look at, is this person my person?
Right.
And sometimes you have somebody that's your person at 20 that is not your person at 40.
Right. Right. And that's okay. And you have to be okay with that. Because I think a lot of times what happens is that we get caught up in this stuff, relationships, and then we end up being yes, yes, yes. And then we end up having this internal emptiness. And I think that when you're unhappy like that internally, all kinds of things do manifest. Sicknesses, illnesses, cardiac disease, autoimmune deficiencies, all of those things kind of manifest in your body. And that's because you're not walking in your full purpose. And you're not coming up as yourself.
Yeah, your internal mechanism, you're okay on the outside, but everything inside is in turmoil. That's what disease, because if you think, and y'all know this, but I'm going to say it again, it's dis-ease. So it's a dis-ease within yourself, which is causing disease.
Right, right.
So as much turmoil as is going on inside of you, then your body is reacting physiologically to the fact that you're not sleeping and you're working 20 hours a day. Right. And you're not getting rest, and your emotions are up and down.
Right. And then imagine now that you have a partner that is adding to that. So like they're constantly moving the goalpost, or if it's one thing that you're supposed to, it's one thing when you're at work and goals and objectives are set for you and you meet them and it's like, okay, good, I did it. I attained it. But now imagine being in that same scenario, and every time you go to work, those goals and objectives are set, and every time you reach it, they change it, right? And when that happens in a relationship dynamic, it makes you question. It
Your
literally,
sanity.
it literally makes you question if you're okay.
Yes.
I had to call a friend of mine who knew me in that life and in this life because recently, Melanie, because I laid in bed one night and thought that I made this all up. I thought that I made everything that happened in my relationship and in the business, I thought that I made it all up. And I called a friend who knows both me and my ex. And he had to say to me, no. And I called him for a male's perspective. Because I think women, when you call women, girl, of course you went through this. But I called him because I really, from a guy, he was like, no, that is exactly what you went through. It's traumatizing.
It is.
But it's so much easier again when you don't know yourself and have not defined yourself for you to just end up being a chameleon in a room and society kind of creating you to be whatever it is that they think that you should be. And you being, listen, I know plenty of women who are in their 60s and 70s who are miserable. And it is because even till this day, if you ask them what they want out of life, what they want to be, you know, they couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
Because they've never took the time to take up space in their own world.
Yeah.
And create
and that's
the life they wanted.
I think that as women, we need to get to a place where we do define ourselves. Because if we define ourselves by our jobs and we define ourselves by our children
or our relationships
or our mates, then some of those things might end.
If not all of them. Your kids are going to grow up.
Yeah.
They're going to move out.
You're going to retire.
You're going to retire. And your marriage
because
might not work out.
I have a couple of people in my life that when the children went away to college, they were totally lost. They did not know what to do.
They say that because a lot of times that is when the epiphany happens, when the kids leave the house.
Yeah.
And for those women who have children, they say that that is a good time when you're not going to soccer practice, you're not running, Now is the time that you sit down and redefine yourself. The problem is that I don't think that a lot of women sit down and ask themselves, like, okay, now what do I do? What do I like to do? And to take up space for themselves.
They find other things to do to make them busy.
Now they go to church and they over obsess about church, or they
might join an organization.
Right. Or they, pick up their friends' kids and running around with their friends' kids, and they just try to do things to keep themselves busy as opposed to giving yourself some time.
Yeah.
And being okay with you. Listen, I didn't like myself up until last year. There was a point in my life, 2020 to 2023. I really didn't like Marsha.
Yeah.
I didn't like Marsha because I had lost Marsha. And I think that at COVID, having the time to sit down.
You had to be quiet.
I remember calling my girlfriend Portia and crying on the phone and saying to her, Portia, when I look in the mirror, I don't know who I'm looking at. Because Melanie, I'd lost myself in everything. I'd lost myself in the person that I was with. Like, I was literally the person I was with.
But the funny thing about it is that I can bet you money that what drew your previous person to you was your light. Because one thing that I can say about you since you've been a little girl is that you have always had a light.
Then why do they try to dim it?
Because they're trying to control the light. So when Marsha walks into a room and everybody gravitates towards her, well, what about me? And it's because somebody is not secure enough in themselves.
Right.
So depending on who you are as a person showing up in a relationship, if the person that you are entering into a relationship with is not secure within themselves,
they will dim your light.
They are going to try to make you change yourself.
And that's what happened. That's exactly what happened. And then one day I woke up and was like, Where is that little girl who used to shine bright?
Yeah. I remember, you probably don't remember this, but it was a good couple of years ago, maybe a good 7, 8 years ago, that we had, right the day after, if you're from a, either English country or a formal colony, you celebrate Boxing Day.
Mhm.
So I remember there was
After
a
Christmas.
Boxing Day that you came over, Michelle and Devon's,
Mm-hmm.
and you came in the room, and I was like, "Hey, how you doing?" And your light was gone,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine." I'm like, "No, you're not." But I didn't want
Yeah.
to push it, because even as much as I love you, me saying to you that your light was gone
Mm-hmm.
would have been more detrimental.
Yeah, for sure.
So, what I was hoping for was for you to, I hoped that at the time you had enough people around you
Mm-hmm.
that would create those safe spaces.
Mm-hmm.
I think even as a community of women, let's just concentrate on the women right now, which, all of us need our communities, but let's just say the community of women. If I have one thing to say about us creating those safe spaces,
Mm-hmm.
is when we see our sisters that are struggling, don't tell them what to do. Just like how you can get on the phone with Ann.
Sometimes you just need someone to just listen and not
try to tell you what to do.
So I think a lot of it came from, we talk about, growing up and what you see versus what you emulate what you see. Regardless of what anyone tells you to do, you emulate what you visually see. And I think that for me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, as a child, it was Miss Ann. It was my godmother who, when I was in middle school, like I would tell her how I felt, and then I'd be like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." And she'd be like, "What are you sorry about?" And I'd be like, "I don't know." And she'd be like, "No, you're just telling me how you feel."
Yes.
But in my household, telling anyone how I felt was interpreted as me being rude and disrespectful.
Okay.
And then that narrative was what was passed along to people outside of my home. And that is what, so if I spoke my mind, or if I walked in my authenticity, right, and I showed up as who Marsha was, it was quickly shot down because you're being rude and disrespectful.
Yeah.
And I think the part that was so frustrating, and the part that I took with me into my relationship, is that I couldn't voice who I or how I felt, because if I did, it would be interpreted as being rude. So then what happens is you end up turning into that people pleaser. One of the things that I was reading in the book that I was telling you about, she says that in her marriage, she didn't realize she had been living in a way that was so disconnected from her true desires until she started listening to her own voice again. She says, "I was so busy trying to be what everyone wanted me to be, that I forgot who I was." And listen, if the book was not my life, and there's so many books that I've read in the past year that I feel like someone has moved into my house. They were a fly on the wall, and then they wrote this book. But it's so true that when you don't take the time for you, you will disappear.
But it has to be intentional.
Right.
Because what happens is we graduate from high school, then we figure out, okay, is it college that I'm going to? Am I going to start my career in another way? Then you find your person, then you potentially have children, then your career takes off. So you have to be intentional about staying true to yourself. But a lot of times, because we're so young, we don't realize that we're losing ourselves
at the sake of someone else.
Right. Or our jobs
or something
our kids,
else.
Something else.
Right.
I think if you are not constantly in check, and I think this is what I want for the next generation. I want them to be able to have those moments with themselves, that it's okay for me to be by myself.
Do you think it's fear driven though? Because a lot of times I think that people, you're scared of losing your job. You're scared of being by yourself. You're scared of not being loved. You're scared of feeling like you're not enough. So do you think that a lot of that is like fear driven? Like, I don't want to. 'Cause let me tell you something. When I left, like, it was hard to feel like, oh my God, like I might actually be by myself. And I was scared about that. And then once I sat in it.
Is it really fair, or is it what society has set up? Because society has
created that fear.
Correct. Mm-hmm. So it's that we think that we are not accomplished if we are not making X amount of money. Mm-hmm. And we are not complete unless we find our other half. And let's say even as a woman, you are not complete unless you have children. And so there are just so many things that society is telling us. And I don't think we have gotten the chance to know ourselves. I think we're falling for, not even falling for, I think we get into what society says that we need to do. But what I noticed when I was 40 something is that I wasn't happy. Mm-hmm. So I can have X, Y, and Z, but because I was out of touch with myself, trying to pursue all of these different things.
Right. So you abandon yourself.
Correct.
But
you didn't even realize.
But unintentionally, you abandon yourself trying to be what everyone else or everything else wants and needs you to be, instead of standing firm in who you are.
And that's why I think we need to be intentional. Mm-hmm. So we have to teach our young people that it is okay for you to take time by yourself. Now, depending on what your other responsibilities are, you're not going to be able to take as much time as somebody that says, doesn't have kids or doesn't have a very intense job. Mm-hmm. So the choices that we make, they also define, all right, what do I have time for? Mm-hmm. But no matter what, everybody has to find time for themselves, because if you're continuing to run after this amount of followers or this bank account or these degrees, mm-hmm. at some point you are going to look in the mirror and you are going to realize that life is more than the degrees that you have, how much you have in a bank account, what kind of car you're driving, mm-hmm. where you're living. Mm-hmm. Because we have seen a lot of people that have all of those things, and they're committing suicide.
Right. Or they're unhappy. I see them all the time. They're just miserable. I think that it's really important to let your kids, especially girls, let them be comfortable with saying no. Right. Like, agreed. Let them be okay with saying no, not, hey, I told you to go clean your room. No, I don't want to go clean my room, mm-hmm. but you're going to go do this. But I don't feel comfortable going to that person's house. Correct. Or I don't want to do that. Or mm-hmm. Mommy, the way that you spoke to me made me feel X kind of way. Or Daddy, the way that you spoke mm-hmm. to me or, knocked me in the back of my head, mm-hmm. made me feel. I think that creating those safe spaces at home first is the ultimate way to get people, or to get the younger generation, to be comfortable with defining themselves and saying, listen, because if you make me a yes person as a child, I'm going to be a yes person in my relationship. I'm going to be a yes person at my job. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be walked all over, because that is what I've been taught to do.
You're going to basically self-destruct.
1,000%.
Because you are going to be trying to please everybody at home, please everybody at work, please everybody, like whatever other activities that you do. And you are not going to take care of yourself. I know, just knowing you, there were times where you were up from 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning all the way till 1, 2 o'clock. You maybe were surviving on 3 hours sleep, mm-hmm. and your body cannot do that. Yeah. And that we have to find a way that you can't have everything you want at the same time.
Right.
You cannot be the perfect wife, mm-hmm. and the perfect entrepreneur and the perfect mom, mm-hmm. and the perfect, whatever else you're trying to be perfect at. Right. There is no perfect anything. All of us need to figure out, okay, what it is that I need to do to, number one, give yourself the oxygen first. Once you now, depending on how much responsibility that you signed up for.
Right. But you have to be okay with the imperfections of life.
Yes.
And I think that's a huge, like, once you're like, it's not perfect.
Yeah.
I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. My partner's not perfect.
And then our kids know that I don't expect you to be perfect.
I don't expect you to be perfect.
Yes.
Right? Like, the kids are going to leave the house and their hair might be messed up. Like, it's okay. It's okay that their shoe might be on the wrong feet. We'll fix it. It's not that big of a deal. Like,
yes.
But to be okay with the imperfections of life is a amount of peace.
And we need to stop judging each other. We
as families, as friends, as coworkers, as let's make things. Listen, my circle is about that big.
And you're the happiest you've ever been.
But in that circle, it's a judgment-free zone.
Yes.
Right? Like, we know that we could say whatever in front of we can call each other out. If you made me feel uncomfortable, I can say X, Y, Z to you.
If you can finish everything that you say to me in love,
I'm
good.
I'm fine. And even having disagreements
in love
in those spaces is different, because you know that everything is coming from a place of love. And at the end of it, even if we agree to disagree, we're okay. I hate, there's a family dynamic that when someone does something to you, they just like don't pick up the phone anymore. They don't call. They just completely pull back. One, that's a part of manipulation. But two, I think I hate that, because I would rather you pick up the phone and say, hey, Marsha, something happened. Probably gonna bother you. Let's talk about it. Let's get to a place of love. Like, let's be at a place of love and move forward.
We have to be comfortable having conversation.
But we're not.
I know, but remember, sometimes it has to do with what that person has been through. Remember what I said. I don't take anything personally anymore.
Okay, I got a thought. Remember how we were talking about the evolution of relationships?
Yes.
Like, when you're with your significant other, there needs to be that same kind of reciprocation within a house, like in a family dynamic. I think that you need to be able to see your children grow and evolve, and you not be offended by it, and you not be offended by their light either, and you not try to dim their light either, because I've seen the dynamic go both ways. So one of my best friend, Dwight, if you're around his family, like, now who they are now, how they push each other, motivate each other, that has transcended into his marriage, transcends into his relationships and friendships. It's just different.
Yeah.
Then you have friends who didn't have that.
Yeah.
And they move different.
But remember we talked about a little while ago. We talked about the fact that you have some situations that are within your household. Your safe spaces sometimes are in your household, and sometimes you have to find them outside.
Right.
And I think just the example that you gave a while ago, it sounds like Dwight has a lot of support within his household.
Right.
And he still has some people outside like you. And,
right.
You know what I'm saying? But I have a girlfriend that most of her support system is outside of her biological family.
Right.
Because there's still a lot of dysfunction there.
Within
And it's not, as much as she has tried to go back and reconcile because you do, no matter how old you get, you still want your family dynamic, your nuclear family.
Okay.
Where you have your mom, your dad, your siblings. You want that to work.
Yeah. Because that's your first.
Yeah.
That's where you want acceptance first.
Correct. But some of us have to be okay
with not
the
getting
fact
that.
That's not going to happen. And that's wherever your safe space is, you're going to know it.
Oh, listen.
And you have to, whether it is within your nuclear family or outside your nuclear family, your safe space is your safe space. And you can't force something. I think we just need to get to a place where we stop taking things personally.
Mm-hmm.
We know that, but you have to have your boundaries within yourself to know I will not be spoken to that way. I will not be treated that way.
Right.
So you define who your people are
Right.
for your safe space, because all of us need them. But then even within your nuclear family, your biological family, let's say, you might have people that are not as far along as you are.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of people that we know that therapy is still a really bad word.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they don't feel that therapy is something that they should do. We embrace it, we go to it.
Yeah.
So, those of us that are able to explore and learn more about that self-care, that evolution, that growth, maybe we are going to be the people that help the others. But you can't, because somebody is not where you are right now, it doesn't mean that you never, you always have to leave the door cracked.
Right.
So just in case they decide to go to therapy, or they might, sometimes people just have epiphanies and something just turns around and they need that crack.
Right.
But I am never the person to encourage anybody to continue to be abused, continue to have somebody just make you feel horrible every time you're around them, totally drained, got to sleep for 2 days anytime you see them. That's not helpful to anybody's growth.
Yeah. I think it's so important to get to the point where you say, okay, cool. I'm around people who are not nurturing who I want to be or I'm becoming. And although it's very painful to like put them on the back burner for a little bit, that might be what you need to do to get to that point of evolution for yourself to be in your purpose. And it's very freeing.
Yeah, because I know people that they've had to close the door totally.
Yeah.
And knowing the whole dynamics, I understand.
You get it. Yeah. From the outside looking in, you might be like, why, what? But once you really get to it, you're like, oh, okay, I absolutely get it. Well, before we wrap up, let's leave our listeners with some questions to reflect on as they continue their own journey of self definition. I thought this question was good. How have societal expectations shaped the way you define yourself as a woman? What version of yourself are you holding on to that is no longer serving your growth? And are you practicing self-compassion, or are you stuck in self-criticism? And I think that's a big thing, because a lot of times we criticize ourselves to the point where we put ourselves down, and it could be coming from other places. You need to constantly be around people who are nurturing your evolution into who you want to be, and to be able to walk into your purpose. Be gentle with yourselves. Yeah. Be gentle with yourself.
Be as kind to yourself as you are to the person that you love.
Yay. Yes. And that wraps our first episode of 2025, Reclaiming Our Voices. This is the Raw Podcast. Again, my name is Marsha Daly, your host, and this is my cousin, Melanie Mathieu. We are real ass women talking about real ass shit, helping women define themselves or redefine themselves if they have not done so already. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we hope that you'll join us next time. Deuces.